Holy cow, it's time for another Sacred Cow Barbecue. Grab a plate if you're hungry for some truth. We're here to free our minds from our collective BS, our belief systems programmed into us through a lifetime of indoctrination by school, church, and media. No subjects off limits. Why? Because it's all connected. Stay tuned. Good evening and welcome to Sacred Cow Barbecue. I hope you're hungry for some truth tonight. I'm Patricia Aiken, an average host with exceptional guests. Next hour, we're going to hear from Dr. Shelly Johnson. She'll be giving us an update on the latest media-driven craze virus scare, the Zika virus. I ran out to the ranch to pick up a few books and make something that resembles dinner, and the dinner was carbs, so if I nod off tonight, you'll know what happened, but don't worry. I've made a new rule here at the barbecue. Anyone that's been a guest more than twice automatically receives co-host status. So Leonard Brett Bork is waiting in the wings and will rescue the show if I fall asleep. LB is the author of the often plagiarized Red Amendment. I've got my copy sitting right here. And he's the brains behind PAC, People's Awareness Coalition. Thanks for being here tonight, LB. Ready to co-host?
Oh, yeah. I'm ready to go. Got coffee
cool.
now.
So, LB, it's time for you to pull your weight around here and your co-host weight and introduce our guest.
Well, I'd like to introduce Joseph Rorie. Like Patricia said, I've been on twice, and I've been working with Joseph since, I guess, 2003, somewhere in there. Maybe you can fill us in on the details there. But he contacted me based on understanding my book was about the 14th Amendment. And Joseph has vastly studied the Civil War history and the law that surrounds it. So I suggested to Patricia that we'd have him on because he can fill in a lot of blanks, especially about the 48ers, who basically was communist, or they were communist infiltration. Around the 1950s, they got ousted out of Europe, Austria, and countries of that nature, and for being subversives, trying to force communism on the peoples of Europe. And they came over here and installed it very successfully. So that's how I know Joseph.
Well, Joseph, welcome to the barbecue.
Well, thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. This is a topic that is really front and center with me right now. I'm reading a book called Blood Money, The Civil War and the Federal Reserve. It's by John Remington Graham. I don't know if either of you are familiar with it.
I'm familiar, but I haven't read it.
Oh, my gosh. I highly recommend it. It's one of the best books. I'm just going to give you a quote off page 51 because it agrees with you folks. It says, "In going into the war, the Southern people did not know the Union would be hijacked and mortgaged so completely that the United States Constitution, as the framers had known it, would cease to exist. They rested their case on constitutional principles which were abolished by force of arms financed by moneylenders." I think that's a pretty accurate statement. Gentlemen?
Yes.
Yep. No doubt.
All right. So, Joseph, whenever anybody's new to the barbecue, and LB maybe doesn't know that, I ask them, what woke you up? What woke you up from the fact that the white picket fence had turned into razor wire over the years? What was going on in your life that you said, this ain't what I've been told?
Well, the knowledge of things didn't come to me till about late 70s, about 1979, as far as the actual knowledge. My family grew up basically very politically talking and thinking, so we had a lot of contradictory thoughts ourselves concerning the way things were running. So I could pretty much go back to, I was woke up in my childhood, but as far as the shocks began in 79, when I found out that the history books and the dictionaries were falsifying definitions and falsifying history.
Well, may I assume by your accent that you were raised somewhere in the sweet sunny South?
Yeah, raised in Tennessee.
Tennessee. All right, very good. So, so your family grew up knowing about, did they have the popular idea of the Civil War, that it was about slavery or about preserving the Union or any of that nonsense? Or did they know it was about banking?
They didn't know it was about banking. They were just knew that it was not what was told. And basically, I don't think anybody actually knew because of the ill-educated programs that was in the school system. It took private research to actually define the problem.
Right. And so, and then UNLV met a few years back, and you've been talking about it ever since. Is this something that you feel like we can ever unwind here in the U.S. and go back to something pre-Civil War?
It's not that it can't be, but it looks very despairing considering the population and what is on their minds.
Right. Go ahead, LB.
Yeah, I agree with that. People seem to be happily, willfully ignorant, and that's the problem. They don't want to learn. I have no idea why. Of course, there's some people that do, but not enough at this point. People like you, I, and Joseph are trying to fix that, but it's slow going.
You're right. It is slow going, and the problem is that cognitive dissonance. People would rather be anything but wrong.
Right.
It must be something in our brain that does that to us, that we want to be right. We want to believe our beliefs, but that's not what we're about Sacred Cow Barbecue. We question everything. And I've never learned anything unless I was willing to be wrong.
Well, there's turning points I could, really point to. A lot of it started in a church building one day when a Baptist minister was talking about the use of the federal money, where it went and what they paid for. And that sort of told me then that, well, then I don't want to pay that tax then, so I won't. And so from that point, I just wrote a letter to the Internal Revenue Service and told them, bye, we won't see you no more. And
what year was that, Joseph?
That was in probably about 83, maybe 84. Possibly as much as 85, because they took me to court in 86. So, they moved pretty fast, because I'm not one to want to sit around and just wait 20 years and let them discover me. I just went ahead and sent them my criteria of the way I'm looking at things. And so I just made sure that I wasn't going to hand them another dollar, and I haven't. So they walked away from me in 86, basically because I argued the freeman status, and the federal court did say that if you was in fact a freeman, that the IRS don't have jurisdiction over you. And that was my argument. So I haven't heard from them since.
Well, my idea on that and what I see happening is stuff that was working in 1986 isn't working now. It seems like they find something that's working, and if it's working too well, then they seem to shut it down. And the corruption has amplified, where they ignore their own laws.
Well, my approach I graduated, from knowledge to the next and next. I would not use the exact same methods that I used in 86, but it still was very basic. I got studying word origin and started discovering the falsified definitions that were put into the modern dictionaries that were false to and actually reversed definitions. And
devil's right in the dictionary, is he?
Well, yeah, but the Merriam-Webster Company in 1864 uh, put out an edition of the dictionary falsifying words like federal, state, republic, democracy, liberty, union, United States. Uh, let's see.
Okay, hold on. Well, don't tease us. Take us back. Let's start at that list again. You want to do a comparison for us?
Yeah, federal. Uh, I guess you should go back to 1823 with John Taylor from Carolina, and there was another famous Taylor, so that's why he called himself John Taylor of Carolina. And he had wrote a book called A New View to the Constitution. And in that book, he exposed the fact that the government was acting as a national government, and it was not ratified as a national government. And in that book, he used a lot of words which he defined for what they meant. Words like federal, state, Congress. These words were specifically defined. And of course, if you know your history, the convention was not published until 1818, so hardly any jurist or lawyer knew what really happened in that meeting in 1787. So when John Taylor got the notes, he writes this book. Well, this became a big problem about states' rights, and people realized that, yeah, we formed a confederacy of states. And that's what the word federal meant and still means in reality. But that's what the word federal meant in 1787 when Madison even made a clear distinction in the Federalist Papers when he said that if this government becomes this, it will be a national. But if it comes out this way, it will be a federal. Because federal and national are not synonymous, and they are absolutely in two different forms. One is a confederacy, and of course, by word origin, you can see where federal and confederate would be kin.
Sure, confederal.
So it was clear that federal meant that, and in the Noah Webster's edition, he maintained that. Samuel Johnson had already had it there. Nathan Bailey, all the lexicographers of the past. It was a well-established definition, meaning federal, meaning confederate. And of course, they changed the definition of e pluribus unum, which also in the Noah Webster's original dictionary claimed that it was a confederacy of states. And they left it out in the 1864 edition. And of course, the word Congress was reversed before in other words, in 1863. If someone wants the specifics on this, I do have a YouTube on about the Merriam-Webster Dictionary Conspiracy, which I actually read off the dictionary's definitions on each one of these words straight out of the 1863 edition, and then the immediate 1864 falsified definition.
Okay, where can we get the link to your YouTube channel?
I think you just look up Merriam-Webster Dictionary Conspiracy to defraud.
Okay, LB, that's one of your co-host duties. Get to work.
Okay, I'll look at that.
All right. All right. I see 1864. This time in the 1800s was such an epic time for our country and in other places, even in Europe, but we were taken down. I mean, we were taken over way back then. Did you see it earlier than that?
Well, it took the Civil War to actually do it. The programs that was out there was not exactly winning, except for popularity, bandwagon, and propagandas, but it took the war to actually seal their goals.
Right. Exactly. And they've been using war the same way ever since.
Well,
actually before.
President Buchanan wrote Sullivan Black, which was the Attorney General at the time, and asked him, this was in 1860, December of 1860, he asked him if we had the power to force the southern states to go by our United States laws. And Southern Black, as the Attorney General, told him, no, you do not have the power to do this. If you go and invade these states, you will be absolving the Constitution. You will be guilty. You cannot go do it.
Well, that's exactly what I'm reading in Blood Money.
Okay.
They had a right to secede from the Union, and everybody, even Northerners, knew that.
Well, yeah, the Hartford Convention was about that. It was subtly known, but it was still about that. I've got an original copy of that of the convention there that shows what they had attempted to do inside, and there were several things that if they would have seceded, in other words, they had about 7 amendments they wanted to get through. The 3 main ones was immigration. Now, immigration was very important because if the immigration would have went through, which was no immigrant could take office, none of the 48ers would have made office. But they showed up in 48, and they were in office by the Civil War time. They had done fulfilled most offices.
Okay, well let's back up a little bit. LB, okay, you're off the YouTube thing. Merbailey has come up with it. Merriam-Webster Dictionary Conspiracy to Defraud. 01.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you can find it with Webster Joseph Rorie too.
Okay, Webster or Joseph Rorie. Rorie. Okay, we just want to let everyone know because don't run over there now, but be ready. So let's talk about these 48ers because we think it had, when you first mentioned 48ers to me, I thought they were talking about the lower 48. What went on before Alaska and Hawaii were part of the... No, nothing like that. And the research that I did on it, was it by a Jewish source. So, they talked about them in glowing terms. I mean, after they got through destabilizing the monarchies of Europe, they came here. So fill us in a little bit more.
Well, it probably started with old Trokovic, whatever his pronunciation is. I've always had trouble with his name, the one that wrote Democracy in America.
Sure.
That was in the 1830s. And America in its true body has never had a democracy in it. It's absolute opposing of democracy. But Alex Trokovic, or whatever his name is, he writes a book, Democracy in America, and it's touted out today. Well, this was a good opportunity because, democracy is basically undefined, and it's got so many degrees to it that it depends on what you're saying when you use the word democracy. But we know in its purest form it was rejected for sure.
Well, isn't that what it was Jefferson that said democracy is 2 wolves and a sheep voting on for what's for dinner?
Yeah, I think it was him that said that one. Mm-hmm. And so the revolution that took place with the idea of the Communist Manifesto thought, well, hey, America is probably pretty sweet for this blooming of our ideas, and of course they come over. They did well. If that Hartford Convention had completed right, we would have had a bar already against their contaminating our country with their presence. They might have showed up, but they would not have been able to take office.
Wow. Do you concur with that, LB?
Well, yes, I believe so. I mean, if you look at the things that transpired prior to these times, Joseph, you had mentioned, they used to have in the immigration naturalization processes that Americans, so-called, or for lack of better words, had to be white. And white back in the early 1800s meant Protestant Anglo-Saxons. So, yeah, they tried to change things right up front or during the period of time.
There were already Jews in America. The Jews ran the slave trade.
Yeah, they were here, but they were frowned upon. Even General Grant had things to say about the Jews creating havoc in some of the southern states. I believe they're just interfering with the war and ripping people off and just cheating them. They were actually excommunicated or thrown out of a couple different states by Grant's army.
Gee, I haven't heard that on CNN or the History Channel.
No, they don't talk about that.
Wow.
But, they've been thrown out of hundreds of countries in the last 2,000 years anyway. Yeah, these people that say it's a Zionist, that's just more disinformation. They're trying to sidestep the real problem.
So, Joseph, so you see it, these 48ers who came in and infiltrated the government by sidestepping this rule of no foreigners.
Well, there was no rule or law of any kind that once you immigrate over that you couldn't take office, but they realized after the War of 1812 and problems that was arising during those days that it would be important that immigrants should at least just live here and their children could begin the office holding, which would be fair enough if you can't just come on in and take office. Am I on or?
Yeah, we're here. We're listening.
And take office. You're definitely not going to get contaminated by the foreign doctrines of the other countries. And I want to jump in and say also one of the main clauses that they wanted to do in that convention also was to restrict the Commerce Clause. And see, those two alone, if they would have got pushed on in, would have changed a lot of things even to this day, because the federal government uses the Commerce Clause to destroy everything they want to destroy and take charge of everything they want to take charge.
Okay, the Commerce Clause.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to define this as we go along. What is the Commerce Clause?
Well, the Commerce Clause gives the federal government the power to regulate interstate commerce.
Right.
But there was and of course, keep in mind that they did not know anything about the term interstate commerce. They only knew the term commerce among the several states, the word among.
Wait a minute. What word are you using there? Above?
Among, A-M-O-N-G.
Among.
Among
the several states.
That's
not interstate.
Yeah, they wouldn't know anything about this new phrase called the interstate. But the Commerce Clause literally has no restrictions, and that was one of the problems with the convention. And it's sad that it just sort of went away. See what happened? The War of 1812 was over. There was so much victory. Everybody was happy, but they was looking down on these northern states that were attempting to push something, or they would secede. And so it looked very unhappy. So they just never met again. It's amazing, but it just sort of went away. To our demise. It would have been a perfect time to bring up some of their amendments that they wanted in that convention. Might have not be that important it was to them at the time, but wouldn't so much hold on to make a big deal today. But the main ones that was important was the immigration. That way the 48ers would have never took office. When their children were born here, not the children they come with, because they would be immigrants too. When the children are born here, when they grow up, they can take office. Well,
so it would just have forestalled it for a while.
It wouldn't necessarily forestalled it. It probably could have eliminated it. It depends on how well they communed or culturalized their little communities and forced the doctrines to really be there throughout the school systems, the playing with the regular American people. Anybody should take time to be in a country or a state. You know, used to a lot of states had laws you can't even vote in their state till you've been there a year. But in 1972, the Supreme Court thought, no, 30 days is enough. So guess what? You get somebody from another state that don't care anything about your state. They show up, sign up, get a place to rent. By the time they go through the setups that the state wants done, they're in their phone booth voting against what your state's always been.
Well, exactly. And I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, you folks will know better about this, but I read that you had to have lived in the U.S. for 5 years before you were even considered for citizenship. Is that true?
I'm not aware of that as far as that specifics. Citizenship has to also be defined of what is a citizen. And second, there was no United States citizens at all.
Right. Well, there were state citizens, though, right?
State citizens, and each state had some particulars. I'm not sure I recall, and I have actually original 1797 copies of these state constitutions. I don't recall anything in there saying that, so I don't know. It could be in their statutes. I haven't read all their statutes, but I have done some pretty extensive research in pre-Civil War constitutions, pre-Civil War statutes.
I must be wrong, because this must be just something. I don't see how they if they didn't have U.S. citizenship then when did they? It wasn't until the 14th Amendment till they started to have U.S. citizen, right, LB?
Well,
that when we first see it.
Yeah, that's what the technical aspect is. But I've argued with some Jews and U.S. attorneys that say, well, there was U.S. citizenship or citizen of the United States status prior to the 14th Amendment, which I call BS on, because people like Thaddeus Stevens and a few others that were pushing, I forget the guy's name offhand, but they said prior to the 14th Amendment, there was no federal citizenship. So it's a mixed bag of garbage that they've tried to push on us. And, of course, most lawyers are liars anyway, or agents. So, yeah, there were agents back then that maybe wanted to think that, but it truly wasn't a concept based on what Joseph said about this national federal government situation. Unfortunately, it wasn't clearly defined in the Constitution. The authors of the Federalist Papers even tried to pull that junk on people when they tried to push it on everyone back, and when they put the Constitution in place. They called it national government in one breath and then a federal government in another breath, which, in some circumstances, one could, which is the worst one. There's two clauses that I think are very bad. The United States having control of treaties and the naturalization laws. Those are two damning things that really destroy state sovereignty, or the state's sovereignties. So, anyway.
In 1857, the Court of California stated in Ex parte Noles that there never has been a such thing as a United States citizen.
Right.
We use it for convenience purposes. And in 1866, that's what the Civil Rights Act was all about, was to create this so-called citizenship. And, of course, Johnson immediately said that would be in violation of the Constitution just to pass an act out of Congress. So that was actually the purpose of running the 14th Amendment through. And, of course, the Susan B. Anthony case, the judge told her, or at least in the report meeting her, that the U.S. citizens was created in the 14th Amendment, which was false in one sense, but okay, he's looking at it in a legal sense, and he believed that the 14th Amendment ratified, so okay, there's its legal reality. But He also went on to say this, that the 14th Amendment citizens, or the U.S. citizens, have limited rights.
Right.
Now, that's an interesting
And
statement.
it was a designation that came out of, what do we do with all these freed slaves now? Who are they? Right? But they wanted to, make us all slaves. So it was kind of a sleight of hand there. LB?
Oh, yeah, that's the basically what happened or transpired.
Okay.
I'm even against the term citizen because it applies duties and changes. A citizen is equal to subject. Even the Vermont Constitution, which I think was the 14th state, it was admitted into the Union after the 13 original colonies. They actually, they're the only constitution that I've seen a naturalization clause in.
The Vermont Constitution?
Yeah, it's about the only one that has a clause in it that people have to live there. I think Joseph did mention it. Like he said, he has some of he did more research than I have on the Constitution of the states. But it actually said you had to live there, I think, a year before you could even own land, I believe. And you were considered a subject, not a citizen. So, but there's court cases that are, from back then and up to this date where citizen equals subject. So it's all a sleight of hand trickery based on the citizen status. I believe it's an optional personage, if you will, that you can take on based on the municipality you want to be controlled by. Even the 14th Amendment today omits people from being 14th Amendment citizens the way the Section 2 is written. A county, for example, could be exempt from the 14th Amendment if it chose to be. The way the 14th Amendment is written, you don't have to be a so-called dual citizen or a federal citizen with the de facto citizenship. I don't talk about that much. I didn't even go into it in my book because I don't want to confuse the issues for people because they have trouble enough, seeing the difference between, pre-14th Amendment status and post-14th Amendment status.
Now, someone's making a comment here, and I don't know if this plays into, I just want to read what's going on in the chat room here. And our friend is saying obelisks, like the Washington Monument. Is that a real thing that they need to be taken down because they indicate sea level is at their top, making Admiralty law justifiable rather than
that's horse crap.
Whoa, okay. That's just what who's come up with that? Is that a Judge Anna thing or?
Yeah, that all these things float around the movement. Now, the first time I met someone that was into the Masonic or the conspiracy issues based on the Masons was back in the mid 90s, and he was pretty much an expert on these things, and he never talked about things like that. He went around doing seminars and symposiums on these type things. I don't know how much Joseph has studied those things, but yeah, there's all these distractions and crazy things that have come about in the last 15 years since the internet's taken hold, and they're all just distractions.
Joseph,
there's a lot of distractions.
Have you seen the so-called movement go to hell with the internet?
I've seen quite a few of them through the years. They have about a 2-year span. That's my observation. No matter how extremely popular they get, about 2 years they go away. When I say go away, they just go back in line somewhere around 4th, 5th, or 6th, and then they got a new one up that's taken over, and it's the most popular thing of the times.
Yeah.
And so I give every one of these doctrines that's out there about 2 years, maybe 3 in some stretched conditions for them. But one thing that I know that I stick to is the common law that's been here since Adam.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't have a 2-year thing that I can go back and say, oh yeah, so-and-so 2 years ago showed us how to do this under the UCC or through the this so-called straw man stuff. Total inventions of imaginations, no doubt. But the common law, it can be traced. I can take you back to Moses. I can take you back to how it graduated into the Anglo-Saxons and how that it was determined as a synonymous term to the law of the land. And our Constitution uses the term law of the land, so it means common law. And so I can force the common law. There's a case, also several cases, but just what I like to properly make use of is Hope versus Henderson, which plainly states that without the usage of the common law, you have been denied due process. So any other court, like Admiralty or these high seas stuff, you have a right to be tried by the law of the land. That is the common law, not Admiralty or any other form of jurisdiction out there.
So common law, some people have a gripe with common law that it's pretty cut and dry and there's not a lot of grace and mercy with it. Do you see that kind of problem? Me, all I see as common law is do no harm. That's, to me, sums up the
and you got a better concept with that in mind. It is some kind of a cut dry because established understandings have stood, and even when new communities come along, they realize that's still the right way to go. You know, if I'm selling your horse and it's your horse and you see me sell it to somebody and you don't say a word, you just let me sell it and I take the $100, I go to Walmart or somewhere and spend it, and then you try to sue me in a common law court, you're going to lose. Why? Because you could have stopped me when you had that chance, but your consent changed the whole scene.
Oh, well,
so
that's an interesting analogy.
This is kind of stuff that the common law looks forward, is that, well, if you didn't consent, you agreed. You let them do it. Now you want to sue them without it. Maybe you feel repercussions. If you handed me a $1 million vase, and while I'm actually in front of you and I drop it, bust it, you're responsible, not me. But now if you tell me, will you deliver that to my aunt over in, say, 2 blocks over, and I go over to deliver it and I'm out of your sight, now I'm responsible for the vase because you can no longer control the circumstances. You've hired me or got me to agree to deliver it. But as long as you're present, you still have the right to pull that vase out of my hand. You're still in control of your object and your property. The common law can be harsh because you think, whoa, you know, I'm the one that broke it, but who was there that could have stopped it and didn't do it? It was in your control that you had it in my hand, and you was there still controlling it while it's in your presence. So yeah, that's a cut and dry problem that people would argue for to the moon never comes back up again. But I see what you're saying, though. It's still fair that you own property, and as long as you've got overseeing over it, you should still be responsible for what happens to it. It's yours. You don't have to have it in my hands.
Okay, well, I want to know when you coach people or people follow your work, Joseph, how does that affect them in court? Like LB's thing is to keep people out of court, but I understand you help people sometimes that are in court. Are you able to get them into the common law and out of the statutory nonsense?
There's a few of them that is willing to go the route, but it's not exactly an easy route to take. If you're willing to argue the arguments, especially the due process argument, the due process argument is unbeatable. There is nothing that can outdo if you'll understand what due process is, the original meaning of it, and how they changed it after the Civil War, and how that you tell the court straight out, you're not going to use any new form of due process. You don't have the power or the right to use anything but what due process meant in 1787. If you use any new form,
let's tell people, what did due process mean then?
Well, the way I guess I put it down in a nutshell is that it means the intervention of the judiciary system. Now, to get that understood, just the court that sets up, take the IRS court, the tax court. That doesn't have any due process in it because it doesn't come from the judiciary branch of the government. It is a legislative enacted court. The judge is a legislative enacted being. The bailiffs, the so-called rules of that court, is an administrative court. Mm-hmm. They do not have any judiciary powers. Therefore, you are being denied due process if you think that you're supposed to go through this system and you're not really getting a trial because you're not going before the judiciary. You're going before the legislature and their system. So you're not getting in before the judiciary. And judiciary has got to be brought in through the actual constitution of your state and the intervention, because before the Civil War, only the judiciary could enforce law. Now, you see today with the executive branch, they even got cars out there that says law enforcers.
Oh, yeah, it's disgusting. And this administrative act that Pat McCarran from Nevada wrote is giving these people all kinds of gun-carrying power that they have no constitutional or common law right to have.
Right. So you got the administrative courts that are here, and they're performing particular cases. I won't mention the person's name, but this one person was very heroic about going into the court against the Internal Revenue Service using this argument about the ratification of the 14th Amendment, the common law. And they suppose was going to sell her house in about a month from that point, had it actually advertised on the internet for sale. And so we filed a writ of prohibition, and the judge admitted that he did not want to sign that writ of prohibition.
Okay, what is a writ of prohibition?
A writ of prohibition is a writ from a judge. In other words, you file a petition for. They are the ones that writes the writ. They sign the writ prohibiting any action of, say, a lower court, or they should stay within the judiciary. We get things mixed up where the mandamuses and the writ of prohibitions get scattered all over the place, but it's a writ of prohibition prohibiting a certain action, like you will not sell the house, for instance.
All right.
And so the writ of prohibition was he refused to sign it, but he made it clear to the IRS that y'all sort of need to take another walk here. And they asked the IRS what they was going to do with this. They said, I don't know, we'll just release it. So they walked away. He admitted, and this was a classic case, and I'd love to see it to go further. This judge admitted on record that we lost that war in 1865. That was his words on record. Second, another statement that he made on record was, if I sign this writ, I will have U.S. Marshals at my door in the morning. Now that shows that he is not making judicial decisions and that he is under the gun on any decision that he makes. And we could have used that in a writ of error to go up to the higher court and show that this judge is not even making decisions judicially, but he's under the gun of the marshals, U.S. Marshals.
Wow. I've got someone that's going to prison this week on Monday, and for 3 months. Just a horrific situation. But in his situation, the judge gave them 45 days to comply with an order by from the FDA, and they were going to do it. And then he came back and 14 days later, lowered the hammer and gave the injunction order. And he didn't even. It went back on his own word, and I know it was because he was pressured by the Department of Justice to do it. So judges
Right.
judges are just administrators at this point. They're not.
Yes.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
were saying something that they report to the marshals. What
Well,
what did you just say about that, please?
he said that if he was to sign this writ of prohibition, that he would be met by U.S. Marshals by the morning. In other words, admitting he's afraid of what the U.S. Marshals will do to him if he signed that writ. He pretty much had to admit that all the arguments were right. And I think if you would like a copy of what I put together on that argument, it's about 160-something page argument. I'll send it to you. Let you read what that judge had to go through before he was going to go against or for. But whatever the case is, and one of the problems I think we are having is that I looked on the U.S. Supreme Court's dockets all the way back to like 86 before I just give up. Never have they ever accepted or favored a mandamus. They always went against them.
Okay, hold on. You're throwing out words like we know. Writ of mandamus. Explain what that is.
That's more of an opposite form of a writ of prohibition. If it's your duty to do something and you don't want to do it, and you don't do it, you can file a writ of mandamus in a court, and the court will order this guy to do it if it's his duty.
Okay.
So the writ of mandamus was basically the basis of the Marbury versus Madison case, and an interesting case by itself because before the Marbury versus Madison case, never before in the history of the world had mandamuses been attempted to be used across the borders of the branches. In other words, a mandamus was set up for a higher court to tell a lower court what to do, make them do it. It never went out to the executive branch telling somebody in the executive branch what to do. But the Marbury versus Madison case was based on them wanting a mandamus on Thomas Jefferson for refusing to give the commissions to the newly elected judges the night before.
My guest tonight is L.B. Bork, who's been a little bit quiet on me. Hey, co-host, come on, have a little more coffee.
I'm letting the expert tell the stories and tales tonight.
Okay, all right, great.
I know some of these things, but Joseph is more of a litigator than I've been with the due process issues.
Right.
And, like you said, there's a very distinct division between 14th Amendment privileges and immunities and privileges and immunities under the Constitution. And what Joseph's talking about is basically true or factual of what is going on with the courts. This maritime admiralty court nonsense that floats around in the movement is ridiculous. It's more disinformation or improper teachings. Basically, the courts are administrative, and it's all implemented. For example, there was no Department of Justice until after the Civil War, or created during that period of time. Wow. So every thing under the 14th Amendment, all Title 18 is administrative law. It's not real law. So these are the things that Joseph and I have taken the time to understand, because we depart. Well, Joseph's been around longer in this than most people in the movement. All these horse crap stories have developed based on people's not understanding things. And I think like the sovereign citizen, title that people give themselves or tend to call themselves, it's getting a little better known now that's kind of an oxymoron, but under the 14th Amendment specifically, or for sure, or assuredly, that these things are disappearing, and I believe the government or the shadow government really perpetuates these bad arguments. They have operatives out there doing that to confuse people and take them off path, and that's my point. What we're talking about tonight is the real law, and not the theories or patriot rhetoric that we keep hearing.
That's the perfect segue into the break. We'll be back after the break, everyone. Stay with us with LB Bork, Joseph Rorie, and from Shelly Johnson. So stay with us. Welcome back to Sacred Cow Barbecue. I'm your host, Patricia Aiken. I've been having a great conversation with LB Bork. He's my co-host tonight, and also his friend and our guest, Joseph Rorie. Joseph's a law expert, as you can tell. And we promised that at the top of the hour that we would bring in Dr. Shelly Johnson to talk to us a little bit about the Zika virus. She's only got about 15 minutes to spend with us, and then we're going to get back to our law conversation, and that's a subject she's interested in too, but I know she's got to run. And Shelly, welcome back, and thanks again for last week being on with Jack Mormon.
It was awesome. Anytime, Patricia. I appreciate it.
Hey, this Zika virus thing, it just stinks like every single scare tactic that they throw out. So unwind it.
Well, basically, we're looking at another attempt by the CDC to create yet another epidemic for which they have the patented virus, of course, and for which they have pallets and pallets of vaccines just mysteriously ready to go. And today I had the fortune or misfortune, depending on your perspective, of sitting in on a health district meeting here in Las Vegas and listening to the chief health officer. I mean, you and I both know the reality of what happened in the Third Reich, but for people who don't, you would be saying Heil Hitler to this guy, because he has quite the agenda, and he has bought the CDC package about Zika and, you know, all of the other nonsense, hook, line, and sinker. And boy, does he have some multi-layered plans for this area. And you know, this is what they're getting at all the other health, county health districts in the nation as well.
I even saw this on the front page of a South Dakota newspaper. First case of Zika in the Dakotas or something nonsense. So, okay, where did the Zika virus come from? What do they say? What's their official narrative on this?
The Zika virus was isolated by the research I've done in 1947 out of Africa. The following year, it was patented by Rockefeller. Go figure. I have copies of the actual patent, and I also have copies of the ability for anybody who passes muster to be able to order vials of the Zika virus. There's actually a page you go and order the Zika virus. So I find that pretty coincidental, but of course we know that's how they operate, and they've got many, many years in advance on their agenda of us figuring this stuff out. The big explosion of Zika onto the mainstream media was this microcephaly condition by 4,200 and something babies in Brazil that started being reported in January. Erroneously, after having done an autopsy of one of those deceased babies, they discovered a link to the Zika virus within that baby's system. So that's where they jumped to these conclusions. And just because somebody has, evidence of a virus does not indicate that that's a causal factor in the death of anybody, or even in a disease process for that matter, because the virus has to reach a certain viral load for it to create any problems. And the CDC on its own website in discussing Zika talks about how the symptomology is mild, how nobody has ever died from it, how if you do have enough to create symptomology, that it's occasionally a rash, occasionally a slight fever, and occasionally mild flu symptoms. So please explain to me how any of that leads to microcephaly. And for those who don't know, that just means babies are being born with smaller than 32 centimeter sized brains.
Oh, like in California where in this farming community where babies are being born with no brains because of all the pesticides and
Exactly.
Oh, it wouldn't have anything to do with that, would it?
Of course not. Of course not. And they're also ignoring completely the fact that 25,000 microcephalic births take place in the U.S. every year. And it has nothing to do with this stupid damn mosquito. Pardon my French, but I'm just over it. And now in Florida, they're really seriously imposing upon women to not get pregnant. And if they are pregnant, they're asking to allow CDC workers to come and collect their urine to verify whether they've got the Zika virus or not.
Oh, so they can put them in quarantine.
Exactly.
And what are they spraying everywhere? Now I know they've gone on this spraying some kind of neurotoxin around everywhere to get rid of the mosquitoes carrying the Zika virus.
Well, the interesting thing about the mosquitoes is that none of this even began until 2012 when they actually released the GMO mosquito. So we have to factor that one in. The Brazilian outbreak was compounded by a couple of factors. The herbicide that they're using to, eliminate the so-called mosquitoes that are creating this chaos. And the other part of it was that earlier in 2015, they began to mandate pregnant women to have the Tdap vaccine.
Right.
So we have a combination of nuclear basic forces coming together to create this horrific outcome for these children and their families. So this morning when I was at this meeting, before we even had a chance to discuss the Zika agenda, we had a couple people being given awards by this crazy doctor who thinks he's God for pushing the Tdap vaccine through a myriad of social networking and award winning and patting these women on the back when I could have just gone over and strangled them both. And there is an effort now across the country to do what they call cocooning, which is the effort at identifying the circle of each individual who has any signs of whooping cough whatsoever. So they're going to cocoon these people, which is a nice word of saying quarantine, and make sure that all the people in either the locale or the social network of these people that are coming down with whooping cough are mandatorily vaccinated.
Well, yeah, but people with whooping cough outbreaks
are already vaccinated.
They're already vaccinated, and they've already had booster shots. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean oh my God, and people are so stupid about this. LB and Joseph, do you have any questions for Shelly so far about this? I appreciate you letting us take a break on this, but it's been all over the front page lately.
Yeah, I personally think it's criminal. These people that are doing this should be in prison and put to death.
Well, they should certainly have some repercussions for sure, because I will grant you that the people that are doing this work on the local and state and perhaps even regional level are so-called, well-doers or have the best in mind perhaps for the populations that they're supposedly supervising. But for a fact, just based on the exposure that we've had from the Vaxxed movie, that the CDC is corrupt as the day is long. And they modify and other euphemisms for lie in their research and their data. They destroy that which doesn't fit the narrative. And this is where these instructions are being given directly from the CDC. And so this guy here, Dr. Iser, is just working straight out of the CDC handbook. And they've refined the process a little bit this time, because the last time they tried to create an epidemic wasn't it Ebola? And the time before that was H1N1. And before that, it was
H1N1.
SARS.
That one kept me up at night.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody here in the chat room is making a great comment. It says, Jim Willie says Monsanto is using Zika to cover up their insecticide poisoning of the population.
I would not be surprised. I'll have to drop Jim an email and see if he's got any data about that, because I've had him on my show a couple times, and he's a brilliant guy. Right. And he branches out beyond the financial world, and that's what I appreciate about him.
And Murbailey has also said the vaccinated shed and spread vaccines cause the absolutely. There is every pandemic is an injected pandemic.
Absolutely. The flu epidemic of 1918, how do you think that happened?
Oh, absolutely. It was the soldiers at Fort Riley, Kansas. They got 20 experimental vaccines.
Yeah.
They were dropping dead right there in line. Okay, back to Zika. So what would you say? It's just another made-up nonsense.
It is, but they've refined the process now, and that's where I was trying to go with this. They're not just hoping that the epidemic takes hold so that people get scared enough to go get the vaccines. They are being extremely proactive by implementing this spraying to make sure that people get sick, so that they make sure that they'll go run to the government in the typical Hegelian dialectic behavior and get the vaccine. So this is the advance, this is epidemic 2.0 now, because they've learned from their other mistakes.
Yeah, they've learned when people don't run to get vaccinated. Joseph, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, I was going to bring up if she's observed the what I just call fake spraying. I'm also in pest control, so I'm aware of bugs and what they can do and how fast they can do it, etc. So, I already know that there's no way it can spread at the speed that it's doing on its own. It has to be done, scientifically or
engineered.
Engineered.
Yeah.
But the spraying, if you'll notice that it must be that one guy all the time, because every time the CBS people show the spraying in Florida, it's the same guy for 2 weeks later, and he's got this smoker going, and the smoke gets right in his face, so it can't be much going on there. I agree that he's got gloves on, but you just don't stand in the midst of this supposed pesticide that's supposed to kill. And so I'm not sure if this is all show or not.
Yes, I'm right there with you. I would like to hope that it's a lot of, song and dance and smoke and mirrors. So
I believe. Sorry, I was
Go ahead.
interrupting. I'm of firm belief that 80% of what we hear from the media and wherever is all fear tactics.
Well, I'm willing to go to 95%. So I agree with you.
Well, that's better. So I feel
Okay,
I feel better now.
I'll go
95 raise you to 98.
It's all just distraction.
It's a lot of bullpuggy for want of a better term, but that there is the agenda item that was mentioned several times today about abatement, mitigation, blah blah blah. Now, just having said that about this jackass chief health officer here, I will say that the environmental health unit, department, whatever you want to call it, I really, really like the woman that heads that up. And we had a fairly long conversation with her this morning about our concerns about the, automatically jumping to spraying, et cetera. And she says, well, that, just to calm you down, that is not our protocol. However, I cannot swear that that's not going to be what other communities do. But her goal is, and her department's goal is to do all the education possible to mitigate standing water, which, propagates mosquitoes, to educate the people that after a rain, blah, 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 they go pour out their standing water. And if they've got pools that are stagnating, to deal with that. So I do appreciate that she's going after the education aspect of this, and her desire is to do everything possible prior to doing any spraying.
Well, I'm all for less mosquitoes, whether they're carriers of anything or not. I just don't like them because they're annoying. But so that I can't get over how they're pushing this here. They're vaccinating children into oblivion.
Yes.
And yet we're making a big fuss over some little virus.
You're not supposed to compare the apples to the oranges or the apples to the apples. You're supposed to just bend over and honor the benevolent government, because they just want to take care of you after all. The condescending manner that the health department board of directors and these doctors and whatever you want to call them, that's the thing that got to me more than anything else is, we just have to do this for the people because they're just so incompetent and so uneducated and so unaware. I wanted to go strangle Chris Giuliani today. I mean, I
Oh,
was that
no.
close.
Oh, I can't stand her.
So the condescension is what gets to me, and the assumption that people are just too dang stupid to understand common sense and watch over their own families. But that's the typical approach to authority, the authority slave paradigm. It's the authority knows everything. The slaves are dependent. Sit down, shut up, and do what you're told.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you can compare that same thing with the honeybees they claim is disappearing. I'm a beekeeper, so I happen to know more about that, and I call them all liars. There's
Well,
no
I'm
such
glad to
thing as
hear that,
CCD.
Joseph. I'm very, very happy to hear that because I've been concerned about, the bee population. But I do know that there's a ton of scare tactics associated with it for sure.
And that goes with it. It's just another word to throw into the pile. The so-called loss of the bees. If you just use your math, they're lying. They claim we're losing 30% of bees per year. Well, this thing's been going on 15 years. We wouldn't have a bee left.
No, 30% of the bees a year?
Yeah, that's
They'd
what
be
they've
gone
always
in
said.
3.3 years.
Yeah.
Hello.
So, let's face our math here. And of course, I got my ideas of what really is. I mean, I think I can prove it if given an opportunity. What's really going on? There are some deaths of the bees going, but I can tell you what it is, and it's not CCD as they call it, colony collapse disorder.
Colony collapse disorder.
Uh-huh.
But
Well,
it's just part of the Zika, Ebola, you name it. It's just on the list.
yeah.
Wait a minute. Colony collapse disorder. You're saying that that's not real? All the people that are having to import bees to, go cross-pollinate their fields and things like that, you're saying that's not real?
It's not real. Now, according to the math in their own reports, you have certain beekeepers that can swear they had their bees died and that they've lost, a lot of bees all the time. Well, I can tell you how you can lose your bees, which I don't want to take up the program. That could be another one in the future if you want to, but I can tell you how I could rob anybody's bees I want, and they'll never know I stole the bees.
Wow.
And then if I weaken their hives because I've stole so many of their bees, then of course they die. Of course everything takes over. Of course the bees die whenever someone has come along and stole their main enforcement and their main fielders and the bees that were actually foraging. When they're gone, they're really struggling, and the enemy can see them quick. That, okay, this is over with for them, and they go in and get rid of them. And the important thing to understand is that you go to any store, you'll see more honey than you've ever seen.
Yeah, but now, and I'm hearing that some of it isn't even real honey.
It may not be, but you also got those independents out there that they're in there now too. I'm not sure how you would, without some scientific devices, prove that it ain't real honey. Technically, if the bees mess with it at all, it's honey. You take sugar water and feed the bee. The difference between sugar water dried up to be like a thicker syrup is once a bee gets a hold of it, there's an antibacterial property that goes in it.
Right.
That makes it honey. And so it would technically be honey. But if it's just strictly sugarcane honey, then it's not the nectar from all these plants. So there would be your fake honey, if that's what we want to call it, fake. It would technically be honey if it did come from the bee and it processed through its chambers.
Okay. Well, you know what? I don't mind running down a quick rabbit trail here, and even not so quick rabbit trail, because I've wanted to talk to somebody that understood this bee thing. Do you mind if we talk about this some more, LB?
Not at all.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So, Joseph, so people can lose their bees, they can have problems, but it's just a scare tactic. And what does that accomplish? Saying that the bees are dying off?
Well, because you got to have an excuse for why they are dying. There are some bees dying. The problem is multi-million-dollar beekeepers. Some of them own 1 million hives across the country where they have, of course, workers and beekeepers to take care of them, but all the honey and everything comes to them. If you'll notice the almond rush, that people are actually delivering bees from the southeast going all the way to California to be part of pollinating the almond trees. And if you watch the film close, and you don't really have to be watching close, you just got to be observant to a point what's going on here. They probably kill more bees there than what the so-called CCD does. They're just so abusive to the bees. Now, my question is...
Oh, wait a minute. What constitutes bee abuse?
Well, thank you, Patricia. That's what I was going to ask.
Well, they got all these bees wide open to just fight each other. Bees will fight each other when they're that close, and with open lids. For one, they'll fight each other. And, of course, they're going to go out, they're going to pollinate the almond trees. But if you'll see them slamming things around, you'll see them actually killing bees that cannot first take that kind of a trip. Anyway, that's too much stress on a bee to travel 3 days in a box to begin with.
3 days of travel for me is stressful.
Well, be in a box.
Yeah.
Where bees are having problems. Now, there's a lot of deaths happening from these people. So my question is, how do they replenish what they're losing and the stress and the bees that they lose? There has to be a system. All the states are trying to force beekeepers to register the beehives, so it's going to be easy to find that Farmer John, he has 80 beehives. James, he has 500 beehives. Bork, he has 50. Well, if I wanted to steal his bees, all I got to do is rig me up about 20 boxes and go set those boxes out with a little honey in it about, I could go 2 miles away from where the hives are at, but, get a little closer, 500 feet within where the hives are at, be a little closer. Hide behind a tree, take a semi-truck full of these rigged up boxes. And all their bees, once these bees find this honey, they're going to go into this box grabbing the honey. Once you see that the traffic is as many leaving with the honey as coming in for it, then you've got your peak. Put your lid on the bees, take them home, and put them in your beehives. And there's a process to that. So you just don't throw them in there, but you can steal bees, and when a queen can make up for, say, 1,000 bees that died throughout the day. And when 1,000 bees go out to pollinate, wouldn't know the exact figure, but let's just guess about 750 of them makes it back, because of course birds, lizards, and everything else is in on this. So for every 1,000 that goes out, there's probably 750 makes it back. Well, the queen has to keep laying eggs and keep the hive up strong for this. But if you're going to go out there and steal 3,000 to 4,000 bees per day, a queen cannot make up for that. She can only lay up to 1,500 eggs a day. So when she lays these eggs, even at the strongest pace, and you're stealing 2,000 or 3,000 of her field bees each and every time, then she's going to get weaker and weaker as just 5 or 6 days go by. That's when the enemy comes in. The wax moths, the small hive beetles, the varroa mites, you name it, they're all coming in, and every beekeeper can legitimately get on the television and tell everybody, I had 800 hives that died this month. Well, they did, but it wasn't CCD. I'm willing to say that. It wasn't CCD. It was you got robbed of your bees. They're talking about disappearing bees. Well, you think about it. Disappearing bees. Why would a bee disappear? They're habitual. They're going to do exactly what they're supposed to do, and they're going to come back to it.
Okay, now, so you don't think the amount of pesticides that we're using in chemtrails and electromagnetic frequencies that we're getting off of, cell towers and microwaves are affecting the bees?
They may affect them some, but if it's affecting the bees, it would affect all the other insects, everything, because, they're basically engineered the same, pretty much mechanically built the same, got basically the same fiber that makes them up, lung type breathing systems. every insect would be, I would say, evenly contaminated with this, and I'm sure there's some effects. Like coffee affects people, but it's never going to kill them. And you name the towers, the chemtrails. The chemtrails is probably the most probable to hurt the most. As far as the pesticides with bees, if you're spraying during the blooming and after the bloom, then yes, you can kill the bee. But if you did all your spraying before the bloom, then it doesn't matter what you sprayed on that plant. The inside of that bloom is perfectly sealed and protected. Once it opens, it's clean as a whistle. There could be dreadful stuff on the outside of the plant. Now, a honeybee doesn't land and crawl around all over the place. He lands straight inside the flower bloom and does his business and flies straight out, so he never touches the rest of the plant anyway. So pesticides could play into it because of the fact that if people are spraying all the time and they do get the blooms as well, then yes, you're going to have some death from that. So
okay, someone wants to know GMO flowers are said to kill some bees off or weaken them.
It probably can have a lot to do with that. It's you're undermining your diet. Their diet has been undermined. So weakening their systems. I do know that bees can act a little funny that they have. I've been doing bees now 35, maybe 40 years now. I'm not sure. I've never really counted that much. It's been way back there. And I'll admit that the bees are not acting the same way they did back in the 70s when I first started.
Okay. In what way?
Energy, production, viciousness, and as far as I'm concerned, bees. I raise only mean bees. I don't like these gentle bees that they've generated out there, and genetically somehow or another got them crossbred with things and got them so weak and tender that you could go out there and probably knock the daylights out of the hive. They wouldn't do nothing to you. Well,
Joseph, what about the Africanized interbreeding? Is that a problem?
It may not be. I think I've got a few Africanized bees. They sure act like it. And, Africanized bees is not as much a problem as you think. It's just that the possible actions that they can do could take place. They have been known to do it, but it's not a daily occurrence. And they are a little more active and protective, and they put more guard bees out, and that's why I suspect that mine has some Africanized traits somewhere in them. But that's what I want. I want the mean bees. I don't want these little gentle bees anymore. I used to have a few of them. Go out there, no bee suit or nothing. Just go out there and open them up, do what you want to with them. Well, when their enemies come in, they're the same. They're just as gentle.
Mm-hmm. So you want the bees that'll fight back, essentially.
Yeah. So if they're not trying to sting you, you don't want them.
Mm-hmm.
But now there are certain contradictions, just like we all know, contradictions on reports. I have to live on reports as well. One of the contradictions are about of Africanized bees is they never settle in a hive. Well, if that's the case, I don't have Africanized bees because they are willing to settle in my hive. They flow with the honey flow, and when the honey flow is gone, they go ahead and leave with it and go find a new area of blooms. So they don't live in the same hive year after year like the American honeybee. So when you might have crossbred, if there've been some crossbreeding of this absolute African bee into the American bee and the Italians and these other bees, there may be that part gone out of them now. But I do know that I've got some pretty mean bees.
Wow.
Different from everybody else's.
Is someone saying, Zippy's saying European hornets that spread here attack all bees too? Do you find European hornets to be a problem?
They're not a problem here. They may eventually. And another thing about the Zika, just goes back to Zika stuff. No insect can take over the world in a week. or 3 weeks or a month. You know, that they have a limited lifespans as it is. Some of it's only 24 hours. Some of them is a week, 2 weeks. It's impossible for them to be everywhere all of a sudden unless somebody did it.
Exactly right.
Wow. Okay, so bees are acting differently. Bee colony collapse is a scare tactic to make us worry, and probably so we'll do whatever they tell us to do.
Yeah.
To keep the bees around. Yeah, just more manipulation.
Yeah.
Shelly, anything you want to add? Anything else on Zika that you want to throw out here before we let you go?
Not really. I will be participating in the environmental health unit for a while, so I'll have more data as time goes on to see what the actual mitigation processes are and that type of thing.
All right, well, give them hell.
Oh, you know I will.
I count on you.
Okay.
I count on you. Listen, you're welcome to stick around for the rest of the discussion, but I knew you said you were crazy busy, so if you need to go, feel free.
Okay, thanks, guys. Nice to meet you, and I'll talk later, Patricia.
Okay, thanks, Shelly.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
Okay, wow. Jack of all trades and master of many. Joseph, thank you so much for that education. I've been buying that bee colony collapse thing for a while, just like I'm sure so many have. So really interesting. Interesting. So a bee's actually the canary in the coal mine? Environmentally?
Most people think so. They're not I don't know if you can compare it that way, but, the idea is that, bees are very important to us. And if they was to be dying off, we could look for a very low food shortage because of the pollination ability. But you still got butterflies, bumblebees, which they don't seem to be affected. When we look at all this scare tactics of the honeybees, you got to ask, well, would the same stuff out there be killing off the others too? Think about it, because it's important to realize that it would be equally across the board.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. I've never heard anybody that knew bees and kept bees say that I just don't have this conversation a lot with people that really know bees. So thanks.
Well, in 1998, when the so-called scary African small hive beetles was suddenly contaminating the entire southeast of the country, I knew there was a problem then. There's no way that anything can spread that fast. You've got to put them there, and you've got to have plenty of them to do it. And the people were dying. They were reporting as much as 800 hives dying out of their 1,000. A good 80%, 60% of their beehives dying over the small hive beetles when they first got here. Now, I went and did my own little private garage-like experiments to see what I could do about home remedies so that people would learn how to handle them at home without buying all the big stuff from the giants out there making riches and riches and riches.
Right.
And so I did end up, I'd say inventing, but I don't like the term that well. It's using other knowledge that's already out there. But what is called a larva trap, which was able to trap the larva of the small hive beetle, because the beetle itself wasn't about to be stopped. He's too oily, and he's got too small. The bees can't cut his legs off or keep him from coming in and bite him or anything.
Those mean bees. Whew.
Yeah. And the glue boards wouldn't even stop them because they got oil on them. So you put a glue board down, and they can walk through it, but not fast. But anyway, I had got the larva deal just to show you where corporations are involved. And I put out an internet thing explaining that I've got at least a larva trap. It doesn't solve the problem immediately, but at least we can kick back on the next generation. And I got probably 2 orders. And so I gave up the project. A few universities called me way after I gave up the project, and I told them I'm not interested in messing with it anymore. I put out every little dollar I got. I don't have very many dollars as it is. I really strayed to put this thing together. Well, About 10 months goes by, and a fellow calls me and says, I'd like to buy a lot of your larva traps to sell in my shop. And I said, well, where'd you hear about me? Because I ain't even been on the internet a year almost. He says, strange thing, I just come from the National Bee Convention in Nashville, Tennessee. He says, you was the number one conversation there. I said, I was. Well, how come I'm not rich? And he said, I'll tell you why. I said, all these corporations there had boxes and cases of their junk, selling it and downing you while they were there. I said, oh, that's how come I was the number one conversation. My larva trap wasn't worth nothing, but their junk was the best thing in the world. I said, let me see their junk. I read the label. I said, see, it won't even work. You can't even put this stuff out during honey flow, and honey flow is when they live.
Oh my God. The corruption, is there anything that hasn't been corrupted?
That's right. So it's
now,
out there.
We've got a couple of people here in the chat room that said that they've noticed a noticeable decline in all insects. Several people are saying that.
Well, you have an increase of lizards, I think. Would anybody agree with that one? That would be a proof of that, what they're saying. Because, you got to have the cycle works so well. And if you remember your basic science, if let's say every insect died, all the birds would die. The cycle would just start collapsing. If you get too many birds, then you lose the insects. And then the insects balances it back out and you lose the birds. Either one way or the other, you're going to lose. If you get too many insects to a point where they take over, say, your life, because you see plagues and so forth here and there. They're pretty much frequently done and then over with. But your cycle of life with insects especially are usually so short-lived that whatever problem they have will only live so long of their generations. The birds will come back. And lizards are right now on the rise. At least in my area, I see more lizards than I've ever seen in my life for the last 2 years. I've been observing that because I've just wondered what's the deal with the increase of lizards.
Oh, are they fatter? Just kidding. No.
Just more. Yeah.
Okay, we know. Well, that's pretty interesting. I mean, I think there's a balance that, but people are concerned about the way the weather's being manipulated and all the toxins and poisons that are making us sicker. So it has to be having an effect on every living being.
Well, the bees, like I said, they do act funny. I've actually watched a bee come in with pollen, and then instead of going into the hive, he turns around and he keeps walking around on the little platform eyeing me. And then he goes in a little bit and he comes back out, and it's almost like he changed his jobs. Bees have what is called guard bees. He's got pollen. His job is just go straight in, put the pollen in the cone, and go back out and get some more. That's what his job is. He's supposed to be trying to be a guard bee. So I observed him, acting as a guard bee, and I've always wondered about that particular one. And an interesting thing that I saw go in my hive one time was it looked like a honeybee to the pieces, but it had like a round circle on its back. Now that I've only seen once. And so I've been out there trying to spot him again, and I'm not sure what I would say that was. But he had every feature of a honeybee, but he had a round circle on his back. And that's just a mystery. I wouldn't tell you what that is. Who knows if that one of these little drones they make. Go in there and kill bees by drones. Go in there and pop them dead.
Yeah. Yeah, we're under assault in a lot of ways. No doubt about it. And this change in the vocabulary. Again, I want to remind everybody the name of your video, Merriam-Webster. Straighten me out again.
The Merriam-Webster Dictionary Conspiracy to Defraud.
Okay, Merriam-Webster Dictionary Conspiracy to Defraud.
Yeah.
Got it.
See words like Congress that got reversed in meaning. The word state got reversed in meaning. E pluribus unum, federal, democracy. liberty, union, delegate, senator, anything that you could pretty much define a form of government, it got changed. So our government didn't change through amendments or proper law. It got changed through lexicographers. What you think is our government, you're using the words that define our government according to what you think they mean.
Well, there's something called switch words, and it's really kind of an interesting study. It's a kind of a Hindu study on the effect that words have on us. So I think this is the more esoteric people listening to this will really get a lot out of what you're saying, that they've changed the meaning of words. That's really interesting. But I wonder if we respond to those same words in a different way on some kind of a frequency level, even though they've changed them. But that's kind of an esoteric conversation to go into another time. So Congress, did we talk about Congress, LB? Did we talk about Congress? I didn't make a note on it.
Tonight?
Yeah, tonight.
I don't think we did, no.
Okay.
I would remind people that Karl Marx said everything black would turn white and white would be black. So this is all Marxism.
Right.
It's all part and parcel to Marxism.
And I don't know if anybody's ever really found out if the head of the CIA actually said, well, no, our mission's complete when everything the American people believe is false.
Right.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
See, these are all things that people really don't think about when they hear statements like, what Karl Marx said about, everything will be changed. All these subtle, analogies or whatever, they don't apply it. They don't think about it. And, we're talking 150 years and the slowly cooked froggy principle that,
right.
People just don't understand it and they don't want to believe it. I saw again today someone posted on Facebook that, we're being turned into Marxists. I go, they've been working on this 150 years.
Exactly. Actually,
longer, actually.
Since Babylon, really.
Oh, yeah, it's thousands of years old. So, yeah, people just want to stay willfully ignorant. And it's, hurting all of us.
Right. Well, and that's how we've been programmed, and they've killed off the questioners.
Yes.
So, do you share that frustration with LB, Joseph?
Oh, yeah, probably more so. I don't think anybody knows how frustrated I am. I don't think I want to actually define it for anybody. I would have to use very distasteful language to get it out.
Okay, it's more like Mount Vesuvius versus, Kilauea volcano, or okay. So I got that. Yeah, it's we're doing what we can here. How are we going to get rid of the islands and the island makers, and have this People's Awareness Coalition all work together? What are some of your ideas, Joseph?
Well, hopefully, like your radio station is really reaching people that wants to do something about it instead of go to the coffee shops the next morning and just, talk about what you said last night. And then, oh, really? And then it's over with. The week's gone and they're right back into their routine. We need people to get really fixed on fixing this. It can be fixed. It's not impossible. It's just looking despairing considering the way that people are going. And so I'd like to know that, like your radio station and others are actually getting inside of the people. I do see a slight difference of the people of the 80s, how they are now. Some of the stuff that I said, my neighbors looked at me as I was a weirdo and whatever, that tie everything and so forth. But see, now they're pretty much where I was in the 80s. They're beginning to doubt things. I mean, there is a growth. I'm not appreciative of the speed of it. It seems to be too slow, way too slow, like molasses versus lightning.
Right. Yeah, I share that. I know people are talking about stuff like you said that we were talking about 40 years ago. People are just talking about that now. So, yeah, I mean, it's when they have to get up to speed a little bit faster, wouldn't you say, LB?
Yes, well, you can see, I don't know if it's because of the internet or the way things have been going, but you can see an exponential increase on their programs. They go faster every year, it seems.
What
And
programs?
the Obama debacle or insurgency or insertion, rather,
Mm-hmm.
is probably one of their biggest moves they've ever done.
Oh, I agree. And that thing cranked up. 2008 is when I noticed it. After the election,
Right.
before he even took office, the thing went into warp speed.
Right.
And so even though we're waking up they're staying ahead of us at a.
That's what people don't want to appreciate or realize, that these guys are 10 steps ahead of our one step. And they keep saying that, they listen to idiot Alex Jones saying, we got the whatever on the run, the New World Order on the run. That's horse crap. Don't let your guard down, people. They're ahead of us. Yeah, they're having trouble, but I've been telling people, and we all know, which is common sense, the division and the lack of wanting to know the truth is what's hurting us. And the distractions, as we've talked about during the show here. Ignorance breeds fear. And the distractions and all the disinformation make people fearful. And, I think that's the main problem.
Right. And the whole thing, Joseph, what I find is that we're making bricks without straw. That's a term from the Bible. But people are so busy keeping a roof over their heads. Or are they? I just think more people are struggling more and it's part of it because, divorce is epidemic these days, and, everything's so expensive. People have to, put more time into their job, that they don't have time to do the things that our ancestors did when they only worked 14, 15 weeks a year.
Well, if you go back to 1946, you will find that a man by the name of Beveridge, he was a socialist from London, and he wrote a book called Full Employment. Now, that book, which I have the original London edition, first edition, and I've got the first edition that came from America. He wrote this book in November the 15th. It was published in November the 15th of 46. I could be a year off. It could be 47, 48, but I study so much. I don't have one of these photographic minds, so dates and stuff sometimes escapes me. I'll say a lot of times. But anyway, he wrote a book against leisure living, and he was a socialist that wanted to put everybody to work. It's time to work. You got to put everybody to work. Everybody's having too much fun. If you'll look back in America, you'll see pictures of old ball games where people were there in three-piece suits in the daytime seeing a ball game.
Right.
And it was normal to just socialize, go around, and if you had kind of a little job, one guy in the house did it, and he would take care of sometimes 10 people in the family, one guy. Well, he wrote a book telling you how to put everybody to work. Now, this was November the 15th of the previous year. January the 6th, our Congress, in the 81st Congress, wrote legislation in chronological order of this guy's book.
Oh, my gosh. So they destroy the economy to force everyone into the workforce?
Into the workforce, deplete the ability of what you would have made, give or take how you would define inflation versus price hike, what a real silver dollar is versus a paper dollar, et cetera. But the average person back in the 30s and 40s, one person in the family pretty much did the work, and he didn't work all week. He just did what needed to be done. Everybody was happy. But all these people sitting around fishing and visiting and socializing and planning to see the pastor for the week and just running around having fun, Beveridge decided that this has got to stop. So he wrote his book. It's called Full Employment. And it's probably available if you go look it up on the internet. You might be able to find you a copy. I don't think it's rare, but you compare it with the 80th Congress, could be the 81st Congress, and
that's still 1946, 47.
Yeah, 96, 47. Anyway, within 6 weeks, our Congress is actually writing legislation to promote and to provide for this type of work and to get everybody to work. Well, we're all working and no one still seems to make it with everybody working.
So what was the benefit to getting everyone working?
Well, you see who keeps getting richer. You added billionaires in the world, right? They
Yep.
used to be, but like what, 5 billionaires across the entire world for no telling how many decades? Now they're piling in. It's almost, if you're not a billionaire, you're poor.
True enough. But I think in part of this 1946, even before, that's when they changed the curriculum in the schools. It's kind of a famous YouTube video that goes around about this, that they, people didn't have this, worker mentality. They weren't good worker bees. They were individualists like you're describing here. And so they had to train them, in school. And that's what the sit in desks, hand your papers forward, do everything as you're told. That was all an agenda to get the population to be good workers.
Yeah, in other words, you're taught to get a good job, get a good job, get a good job.
Yes.
You want to be educated, get a good job. And so with this going on, this is why even when I face judges, I do know that I'm actually going to have to educate the guy. And I hate to be that way. I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be. I know y'all said it a few times tonight. That's flattering, but no, I'm not an expert. I do know a lot. I'll give myself that much credit. I will pat myself that I have taken the time to study beyond the average person. But I also know, and I tell people, you're going to have to educate the judge because, one, he's been miseducated himself.
Right.
He's got dictionaries that has already falsified his understanding of words. And he is under the Black's Law Dictionary, which is another corrupt form of teaching law.
Wait. People genuflect when you say Black's Law Dictionary. You're saying that's a corrupted dictionary as well?
If you go back to, I've got all the editions from the first up, you will see the graduated changes of necessary changes that's necessary for the times. Take the word public, for instance. When a politician says, for the public good, we're here for the public demands this, the public safety, the public. Well, go to the Black's Law Dictionary and see if you can understand who is the public. Read it for yourself and see if you can come out with who it is.
Okay.
Now,
you're not going to tell us? You're going to tease us?
Well,
we only got about a minute left, so
okay.
Come on.
The point is that it could be as less as 10 people.
Wow.
They're a little special elite group that they just come out of a meeting. It could be that. They could be the public. So when a speaker comes out and says, well, it's for the public good, they could be talking about their little group they just come out of. Read it. You'll see that there's no set definition for public. Mm-hmm. When the first edition of Black's Law Dictionary came out, it plainly stated the people at large. Okay, I can live with that one. It should just stay there. But now they got so many trends. The Black's Law Dictionary is nothing more than a compilation of modern Supreme Court opinions. When they change their opinions, Black's Law Dictionary comes out with theirs coming up next.
Yeah, like why would you need like the 9th edition?
Yeah, it's what they call judicial activism and its departure from the original system.
Right, exactly. Activist judges.
Yeah, which is them just, the old Rush song that was called 2112, the group Rush. They are Luciferians. The priest of Syrinx.
Okay.
We're taking care of everything, the songs you hear. I forget the lyrics, but that's what these people are. They're priests, and they wear the black robes, and
That's right, the
that's it.
priestcraft. Well,
Yep.
everybody, I can't. This flew by. I hope it did for everyone. Joseph, Rorie, thank you for being our guest tonight. LB Bork, thank you for being my co-host. We got to do this more often. Everyone, Sacred Cow Barbecue signing off.
Thank you. Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you.